Hello, Aditya Bandi from Cabify, right?
That's right.
And yes, great to have you fast forward. One of the great fast forward stories, to talk about today. And we will talk about the five animals, as usual, the structure where we change the world, hopefully, from Nassim Taleb Black Swan theory moving forward, then, of course, with other animals and questions connected to that. So from global to the market perspective, to move to the company perspective, product perspective, and then most important, personal, how we all feel about these fast forward changes that are happening now. So if you look from the global perspective and your company, maybe you would like to say a word about yourself, and the company.
Yeah. Nico, I think you got stuck there for a second. But yeah, about myself, I've been a PM for about, I'd say 12 years now, which is quite crazy to think about. But I've been always interested in startups, always moved around quite a bit, trying to find interesting problems to solve. And I've been thankful and happy to be at Cabify. It's one of the big ride-hailing players in Spain as well as in Latin America. We operate in most of Latin America, and we're the dominant player in Spain. So it's been a very interesting journey, and of course Cabify is growing quite rapidly, and we're looking into several different mobility options as well. So it's an exciting time to be here.
Yeah, exciting time, exciting world, let's say. And if you look at the global black swan theories in a way, which trends, for example, out even of your industry, do you think it's moving fastest? Fast forward. Which impact is this bringing to the world? Yeah.
I mean, I think the interesting transformation we're in the middle of right now is really dispersion, right? And yeah. When I speak about dispersion, it's we're cutting out the middleman in so many different ways. Just about 30 years ago or 40 years ago, TV was the only way to reach an audience. Yes. Before that, it was radio, what have you, and now you have obviously there was the internet sort of boom, and then you could reach people through YouTube, whatever it is. But really now it's becoming hyper personalized, and I think that's a general trend across every industry, and that seems to be the real disruptor and the real change agent in the world. And I see some pretty interesting things happening in the next 10 years or so. Obviously, we have other things like blockchain technologies, et cetera, yes. Et cetera. But I really think it's going to be the P2P, the person-to-person personal connection that really is going to drive the next few decades even.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important. I think that we are so much thinking of the global, with COVID-19 and everything, and then we forget about ourselves, like exactly what you said. We're thinking of B2C, B2B marketplace, but at the end it's one-to-one. In what we want right. to connect and build up. There's so many noise in a way. We used to say, okay, our friends, it's a small circle. Then later we said our friends are in our phone. Now you have on Facebook or somewhere your friends. I was just reading today that the guy who is having most connections on Clubhouse is having 4 million connections, and it just started. It's like right. maybe just friends. And we are forgetting this one-to-one, and that then it's what we would like to curate in a way. These relationships, yes. How do you think can we fast forward, for example, also impact of the positive change in the world with being more personal, being more one-to-one? This also help in a way the positive changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the personal one-to-one, it's really hard to. Again, there's so much I think about, right? Like when you think about most of the industries we have now is exploiting the sort of the globe in a certain way, right? So you have all these sustainability issues, all of that, because we've kind of always made that a theoretical thing, mm-hmm. and that cost doesn't really reach the individual. But now in a global world where we go to this P2P sort of model, I think those costs become very apparent, and that's why I think the real costs come into the picture. And so it's a much more dynamic world. It's going to be a much more real world in terms of the value created and the value sort of destroyed as well. And I think that's always a good thing. I'm a huge fan of, economic theory and all of that. So for me, it's actually moving in the right direction to go towards the real market economy, right?
We are exactly touching here the next animal with market questions, in a way. So I met Kim Chan in Istanbul a long time ago, and we were discussing about this value innovation and changes. And I really love the cases in a way, how he presented, how, for example, making it different in a way, making your own Blue Lagoon from Cirque du Soleil to Nintendo, with remote and different cases. So what do you see there are the biggest changes, for example, on the markets at the moment, maybe on your market, company market, or market that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, it's interesting. In the past, all of the competitive advantage used to be by building these moats based on technology, certain standardization of types of technology. Apple still does a really great job with it, right? With their lightning bolt chargers and all of those other things. But I think the really interesting moats now are going to be, and we've already seen it with Facebook and all of these social networks, is going to be the power of networks, of people networks, and being able to actually harness that to then create value, or actually reduce your cost of acquisition and all sorts of things. If you see the general trend in the global sort of markets, everything's moving towards a super app, and there's a certain reason for that, right? So it's you, once you acquire your customer, you don't want to let them go, and you want to be able to keep them in transacting with you, as well as keep providing value to them at a very frequent time period. So I think that's the interesting thing.
Yeah, it's sometimes it reminds me of like handmade, let's say, tailor-made gloves. In a way, we want to be as close as possible, like a second skin to the people. Yeah. Sometimes it works. Sometimes we bother them at the beginning. But if you listen to them, I think this is missing part. It's not about the push. It's many times about the pull, being close, being in the surroundings. Yeah, and this way we are building our Blue Lagoon. And there's so many things. I remember when I was a kid, there was not big choice. For example, sports shoes. When you go today, I remember my sister was going for the running marathon. And she was taking like 3 pairs of shoes. I was like, "You're not Formula One. Come on, you're not changing tires." But no, maybe it will be a little bit more wet, or how would I feel, or this way. So how we try to actually adapt as much as possible to the customer. I saw my sister as a customer in a way to fit in. Yeah,
absolutely. And Cabify does a pretty good job with that, right? So as we operate in Latin America and as we operate in Spain, we know that safety, for example, is a big issue.
Yeah.
Someone like Uber or Didi, for example, they really don't. They understand that safety is an issue, but they don't really understand it as well as we do, and they're not as nimble in terms of addressing those issues as we are, right? So it's interesting opportunities everywhere. Beyond just the sort of like the basic costs and profits and all of that. I think there's even more interesting opportunities where people will start assigning value beyond just the dollar amount. And I think that's really where companies and startups and everything else can thrive coming up.
Yeah, exactly what you said. Also on this value, many times I see also with IT companies, and it's like A to B. Okay, we deliver this, like a taxi driver. You go here, you get there. And with HTEC Group, for example, we're not paying even people by time. Of course, we have to pay them by money. But in a way, it's about adding value to the customers, adding value to the clients. And it's really changing the perspective, because many times we can see that people are, when they are passionate about what they do, when they leave their brain and heart even at work, not just on the shelf. It's how they think already a few steps ahead in a way of bringing the value to the market. It's even before you think of okay what they could think this could create in the future. And okay, B2B, B2C can be different, but yeah, and this is probably making the big difference also with speed of your company, because you're starting from a different perspective. You're starting with knowing the market where you are, and this is creating a change and even sometimes obstacles for the new entries, because it's many times just copy paste the business model, and you have to adapt. Yeah, and here you're touching also the unicorns and speed of the growth. The first in our economy theory, in 2004, when I was discussing with professors, I'm also a professor in MBA, and many times when I say, here's the first unicorn, it was not called at that time unicorn, but it was like $1 billion private company, and they were like, no, it's statistical mistake. It can happen, But for example, last week there were 611 unicorns, on the list, and you ask yourself then, okay, this is not any more statistical mistake. In the last 3 months, there's more than 100 new unicorns evaluation, good or bad. There are many things. Should they be evaluated this much? But it's really changing not only how big you are, but how fast. And it's not just the big one eating the small ones, but the fast ones eating the slow ones in a way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's no longer a unicorn; it's a herd of horses, right? So, if we think about it that way, it's the reason is, I think in the last 13 years or so, we're seeing the biggest bull market we've ever seen, since the 2008 crisis, and capital is really cheap at the moment. Capital doesn't know where to go, so it's going into companies, and I think companies need to use these sort of bull markets to really push growth, and then use these sort of pandemic sort of events, these black swan events, or like the sort of maybe when it's a bear market, to sort of tighten up their operations, make sure that the business models keep working in the longer run, right? So I think it's a function of the time we're in. I mean, at the end of the day, even the growth rates, it's interesting, they're all growing exponentially, right? So even from a big picture perspective. So I do see some interesting trends, and obviously I think we're going through a unique time as well with the markets. So
when you think of this company also, what are the two things, for example, you will double down that you would still like to put on fast track in a way in your company, and maybe why?
I think Cabify, the interesting thing is, we're since the beginning, and this comes from the founders, and this comes from the vision of the company, it's been focused on sustainability, right? And I think we were one of the first, ride-hailing players to actually, have that as a core sort of part of our vision. And so for me, being in marketplace and heading that group, I think sustainability is a big goal for me, right? So even in the business model, how we treat our planet and how many empty kilometers, for example, we don't want drivers driving around empty. We want to solve that problem of getting the drivers as close to demand as possible, so they're occupied rather than them driving around empty around the city, looking for their next fare. So there's some very interesting things there. If we just look sustainability as a goal, I think we want to make sure that if there's an alternative to going in cars, we should push our users towards that. If it's scooters, then so be it. If it's public transport, then so be that. So we're disrupting ourselves as we go, but it's a good thing in a way.
And so this is not just changing the market, it's not just changing the company, like you said, it's changing also the user, in a way, for in a better way, that we are all more sustainable, and you're influencing in a positive way our habits. Maybe the car producers will not be so happy, because maybe some people with millennials, it's not all about the car, in a way, but it's also transport and thinking of the planet. And this probably changed quite a lot through your job or let's say career. I think that sustainability it's getting bigger and bigger. Maybe we didn't saw it so much, but do you think it will be even bigger in the future?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and it's about time. Really, I think everyone needs to look at what's happening to the planet, how we're exploiting it, all of that, right? So I think sustainability needs to be at the core of every sort of company and their thought process. So I think that awareness is reaching that critical mass. I wouldn't say it has yet, but I think it will. And I do see good things from that.
Yeah. Can you tell me about the project maybe you're most proud of working in a company or that you experienced? What is your personal, for example, success that you see? Yeah.
In Cabify or in
yeah,
general?
For example, yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, in Cabify, it's the most interesting thing is the pandemic hit us, and the way the company responded has been truly tremendous. We launched a delivery service within 2 weeks, and that's unheard of before some sort of event like this takes place, right? So overnight our demand for taxis and our cabs in Spain, for example, went to nearly zero, and we had to shift our model literally in a week or 2 weeks. So that's interesting. And then how we are tackling, we had to expand our zones away from our city centers to take into account more of the outer zones in a city, obviously with city centers being closed. So the company, and that brings a unique set of challenges, right? As soon as you do that, you disperse your fleet, your cars to a larger distance, which means the waiting times are longer, and riders are less patient, and all this sort of things. So there's a lot of things going on, interesting things in that space specifically within Cabify at the moment, to, as I said, that positioning problem. And I think the roadmap that we have in the next sort of couple of years is pretty interesting to solve that problem. And thankfully, it also kind of lines up with our sustainability goals. So it's always that's always a plus.
I have a question for you. Since you're now in Madrid, or Cabify is in Madrid?
Cabify is in Madrid, and I'm in Madrid. Yes.
Okay. How did you manage the snow?
Oh my God. It was.
That's a shock.
It was great. It was honestly, we have Gran Via, which is the center of the city, and I've never seen a snowball fight like that.
Wow.
It was in the middle of the road, hundreds of people on either side throwing snowballs at each other. It's
crazy.
It's nothing like when a city is not used to the snow, and we got that much. I think that's when people really let loose and had fun. It was a pain for a few weeks after to clear up all the roads, but the initial couple of days were amazing.
I really wanted to ask you this, because I saw Madrid. I said I have to speak to somebody who experienced the snow. I was only in summertime in Madrid. And here we are also touching the product that you open. And by the way, amazing! In 2 weeks adapting, such a company. It's like wow! It's like moving the huge boat, in an hour that you want to turn it around. And
yeah, I can't take credit for that. I think there's actually the teams that did it were amazing, and the leadership team and everyone else at Cabify, super agile, and that's really agile, right? Like that's
super agile. Yeah.
So
superpower, I would say.
Yeah,
but that would be even a case for students. One day we're going to talk about it, because I teach an executive MBA, and many times I talk to companies, adapting to change, especially when you talk to classic companies. And then here's 2 weeks, you have to act now.
Right.
How to adapt. Yeah. And in this speed also, that's what I give a challenge to my students. Usually in accelerator, you have 3 months time, to create a product, MVP, something else. What I give, I said, are you MBAs? Yes, we are executive MBAs. Okay, you have 24 hours to do what just regular students should do in 3 months. Let's see. And then they make a lot of mistakes in a way, But that's actually the point, because in big companies, you don't make mistakes. It's forbidden. You should not make mistakes. And we record, and then we see, how can we learn for what was the process? Did we calculate these mistakes? Well, and they're totally frustrated because they know they cannot do it perfect. There's finance, it's not perfect. You don't have data, you go out of the building. And it's really how we adapt and how people can, shift in a way. If first it's how to create idea, and then moving to discovery, design phase, and MVP. Right? So after 24 hours, they're totally exhausted. But it's agility that is missing in many companies. And really, congrats. That's amazing what you achieved.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know if you've read the book, The Big History, by any chance?
Not sure. Yeah, no.
You should read it. But anyway, it's the big history of the universe. And, the reason we're here today is because of a lot of things happening in very random ways. And there are certain paths that are, kind of taken, and we ended up here, right? So a lot of innovation, a lot of things. It's all about giving yourself as many chances as possible. And the only way to do that is to experiment and try things, right? So innovation in a nutshell is giving as many chances to yourself as possible, trying new things. So exactly. I think
you're doing also innovation sprints, I believe, in the company.
Yeah, I mean, it's always that, I think for me, it's the agility of experimentation. One of the first things I did when I moved to Cabify was look at our experimentation speed. And I said, okay, we need to 3x this in the next quarter, So I think that's an important sort of thing that we need to always keep track of.
Yeah. We just celebrated this week. That's what I asked. We celebrated innovation sprint with one of our clients, and I was like 300. That's 300 times, the process in trying to be really agile, and it's amazing. And then we're going to have now in Sweden the event in May. I'll send you to see. We'll share what happened in 300 times. Let's say the industry.
Right.
And it's also in transportation, actually. It's Stena Bulk. It's very different. It's shipping company, but interesting to compare. We move then to the next animal from Seth Godin that I mentioned. How to differentiate the purple cow, and here it's always a question how to make it different. What you're doing in Cabify was kind of it's discovered. You rediscovered because adapting to the market. But still, how is your product different? How is your differentiation strategy, let's say, different than others?
Well, it's at several layers. I think clearly in the industry we see certain trends, which is everyone's trying to find their aggregator models, right? They're trying to get into several mobility players together. It's highly fragmented at the moment, so we do see some consolidation happening in the next few years. I think with Cabify, it's really, we want to be the multi-mobility platform of the future, right? So which means any mobility player can connect with us, be part of the Cabify app, and actually monetize with us. I see that happening, and I think that's our real sort of differentiator we're building, especially in Spain and Latin America. I do think even that could get disrupted by ourselves, hopefully by ourselves, right? Where we move more towards sort of the ride sharing model within cities as well, right? So hyper P2P sort of movement could be interesting. I think the differentiation at the moment is all about safety and really addressing our market's specific needs. But I do see more and more consolidation happening, and then actually moving into several different areas related to mobility.
Yeah, kind of keeping the people that you already build up the satisfaction satisfied. And it's one is satisfaction, one is the offer the palette of services they may need in the future in a way.
Exactly.
And if you can move in 2 weeks, that's great agility. So even to test, to experiment, and well, what I usually show to my students also, one quote really like, it's about these failures that you talked before, and it's kind of to fail faster, let's say, to fail forward in a way. So really doing small mistakes, cheap mistakes if possible, and building up. And really, it's important also here to have kind of platform like computer is having many plugins, like you said, that you can do also B2B, because we can learn from many companies that we build around what is the ecosystem of companies that we cooperate, and then also what's their experience. Sometimes we don't have. It was always interesting to see the case also when I mentioned Uber with self-driving, trucks or something. It was kind of out of the picture at the beginning, but at least they were testing in some direction.
Absolutely. I think that's the power of it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, every company needs to figure out how to solve their customer needs the best way possible. And faster experimentation will give every company that idea of what to do, right? And then it's really, once you find that thing that really works, then throw some gasoline on it and make it really grow at that point, right? So yeah, as you said, fail fast, fail cheap, and then once something works, really put some gasoline, or I guess in our case, solar tech and solar and battery tech into it.
Energy behind it. Yeah. Good. And we're moving quickly forward also with these animals. I have we're already close to the last one. So in that last one, I would like to talk about personal, let's say, fast forwarding ourselves. With butterfly wings, the effect, by Jacques Hadamard, it's like theory from 19th century. But we know already also today, we don't have to be Kim Kardashian, sometimes to move the world. Maybe we'll move person to person, I feel like sometimes when I'm mentoring startups also, I'm also investor as angel, and we have a small fund investing. It's how much added value we can give many times to startups, you can see the light bulb sometimes, and it's really rewarding and feeling how much we can help them. So on these personal questions, what was your, for example, biggest challenge you faced in your career, and also in the past? How did you handle it? How did you see?
It's interesting. I started being a PM when I was barely 21, right? So I think at that point in 2010, PM's product management wasn't really that well known, and I was also PMing for teams which had people who are 30, 35, whatever. And so everyone was like, okay, who is this guy, right? So who's coming in and telling us, this is how product should work. I think that was an interesting phase for me. I think I wouldn't call it a challenge, too much of a challenge, but it was an interesting challenge in that you have to bring up your credibility really fast, and you have to show that, show that you understand. And that means working really hard. It means pulling long hours. It means reading a lot of books. It means making sure that you're the first to get in to work, and then probably the last to get out. So it's a long way since then in terms of my career. But I think the first couple of years were pretty challenging. Again, prior to that, I had a startup, and that's a whole different set of challenges, right? I think that's sort of, every day is a new challenge, new learning, new failure, new something, so it's interesting.
But you have a huge experience actually with such a young age, I would say, and with so many projects, with when I look at your CV or LinkedIn profile, there's from entrepreneurial role, to managerial role. What do you prefer? Here it's more in big companies, or just also you have many countries where you're engaged. Also right. Here is a challenge. Is it more important the role or the place where you would like to be? Yeah.
Culture, I think. After all this time, I think I come back to this one thing, which is without culture, everything becomes hard. innovation becomes hard, work becomes hard, sort of your work, your satisfaction becomes really low. So I think if you have good culture, doesn't matter there's a pandemic going on. I think you'll figure out a way to come out of it. And Cabify has excellent culture, for example. So for me, it's always been about, even if I'm interviewing with companies, first of all, I like a certain size of companies, as you could probably tell now. I like this sort of the mid-size startups, but sort of mid-size, because I think when you're too small, it's also a struggle.
Yes.
And then culture. My decisioning comes down to only that. I think salary and everything else is good, but first let's make sure this is good.
How do you feel? Yeah? Because culture can always eat strategy for breakfast. Like people said. And that's part of internal branding. I really liked. I was working with Leslie De Giannatoni on branding already 16 years ago, and he was the one who created the mini cars, for example, a brand of mini cars. And when he started, actually, BMW gave him a blank paper, how to say, carte blanche, that he can create, and he started actually creating from the scratch. What should be the mini? Who should be before employing the first employee, the first build, what should be the culture? What should be the brand, internal brand, who we are? And then building around this, mini just happened, in a way, when putting the right people, putting the right culture in it. They call it internal branding, but it's actually what is the blood inside. It's actually the culture that is building up. And the feeling, I'm sure, with all your challenges, this mid-size is actually, like you said, it's like on the way, hopefully on the way up, when they're financed, and this is adrenaline, how I see it, like how I feel it. With HTEC, we are now growing from 237 in January to 800 last month. So it's also the speed of growth. And it should be 1,000 before the summer. This is kind of the plan. And
that's amazing.
Amazing, In the speed, when I was building, they offered me to be CMO. I was like, okay, I'm not so much interested in marketing, but if you put growth on the top, these are the animals, how we are building company. But I put these 5 animals as the core, and now we are just touching this personal as the key element, how to build internal connection with all the people. And if you talk here, I heard that your superpower, it's also you're a go-getter, you're a good communication skills that you have. What would you call as your superpower? What keeps you going, through your toughest days?
I think curiosity. For me, that's I come in with the sort of mindset that I know nothing, and I think that's an important. For me, it's served me well. I think when I go in with assumptions or beliefs, that's where I've observed I get into trouble. When I go into a situation saying, okay, I know nothing about this. Now let's absorb and be curious about how to approach this problem. And so for me, I would say it's bragging now, right? But I guess my superpower would be sort of that curiosity and then really trying to solve a problem. I think the other interesting thing is, and for people in general, easy problems are fine, but always try to find one hard problem wherever you are and try to solve that. I think there's no sort of comparison to the level of satisfaction you get from solving that really hard problem than anything else, so
that's
what I would say.
The one. I just imagined also, what should be the feeling of the people getting on the Mount Everest? I'm happy already getting on 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 meters, mountain in a way, but getting on the top of the world, and it's the same with the challenges, like you mentioned. Bigger the challenge, the more your challenge to solve even bigger problem next time.
Pushing yourself, and it's personal. Someone else. Never compare yourself to anyone else. It's always about what is your personal challenge and what are you. And I think that's a little bit of looking inwards and looking at being true to yourself and all of that other stuff. But really, it's don't try to compare yourself. I think that only brings disappointment and sort of sadness to life. If you want to have a pleasant life, always sort of think about what you want to do and what you want to solve and how you want to contribute to the world. So
when you compare yourself to the different shoes, let's say, in different continents, if I put it this way, you experience a few places in the US, quite some life there, and experiencing now life in Europe. What is the difference? How do you see yourself, for example, where do you feel better, or how do you see the differences?
I think now more so than ever before, the geographical limitations become sort of irrelevant, especially in our sort of like stream of work, where we can do so much of it online or over the computer. But in the US, it's a different lifestyle. It's living in San Francisco or in the Bay Area, work becomes the only thing you really worry about, and it's like you live the Monday to Friday sort of life, but you're putting in long hours, working really hard, and maybe you go out, you have your Saturday, Sunday rituals, which include doing your laundry and doing these things, right? And I think in Europe, it's sort of, the balance is much better. People, I like to say, in the US, people live to work, and here people work to live. And I think that's a huge distinction. I certainly enjoy being in Europe way more, I think.
Great.
But still, I think the US has many interesting things. If you want your career trajectory to go really fast, I think it's important to spend some time in the US, just because of the sheer amount of work you'll put in. At the end of the day, it's the amount of work you'll put in. So I think there's no substitute to hard work, and the US is the best place to do it.
Probably, I was joking today with one guy also coming from Italy, having Italian roots, and he was talking about the food, and it just popped to my mind, that maybe that's why they invented bad food in US, in a way, with all the fast food. So you really work because you don't spend time with cervezas and tapas and socializing, because this is and all the great restaurants, in Madrid and in Spain, and that you can enjoy in summertime, and but it could be a difference. And if I put for the end, the inspiration, well, you mentioned already one book. I'm ready, having pen ready, to write down. What's your must read, or what do you watch or listen to stay inspired, to be challenged? Yeah,
for me, I read quite a lot of books, right? Mm-hmm. These days, I've gotten really interested in, and obviously the markets are going crazy. So I said, okay, let me learn about investing. So now I'm reading the book, The Intelligent Investor, right now. I think that's a really great book. In terms of inspiration, I think I think just read at least one book a week, sort of. If you can do that, I think it doesn't matter which area you pick it up from, just read. And I think that's it's not so much about retaining that memory or keeping all that knowledge in your head. That's probably not as useful. It's more about giving you that spark of inspiration, I think. And when you read a good book, you'll always get one or two sparks of inspirations. So I think that's what I would say. Yeah.
So you still didn't you're still reading the paper books, or you moved to application that you have a short summary of the book, or
both. So the short summaries are good just to sort of first vet the book and say, okay, this seems interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so, but I prefer reading a physical book at the end of the day. Kindle's great, but nothing beats the sort of like the,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's for me, it's like comparing, I tested for a year, and really was like kind of fast follower on this kind of short summary. But for me today, I compare it more like wine, like vino, when you compare wine. It's great to read about wine, but come on, I would like to have a bottle and taste it myself. It's
exactly.
Good to have a summary about
that's the wine. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I like that.
It's a real book, it's really good. Okay, and would you like to nominate somebody, who would be the leader that you would like to hear in the future on FastForward? Is this somebody who's inspiring you, or who would you suggest, or a colleague?
Actually, there's, our CTO is actually quite good. Carlos Herrera is such a smart guy, and he has a lot of ideas in Cabify. He's a really good option. And the other person for sure is Pablo Carranza. He's our VP of engineering. Again, maybe the smartest person I've ever met in terms of thinking through systems, architecture, all of those kind of things. And he's he's a great mentor to me at Cabify, and he gives me a whole lot of advice all the time. So always thankful to him.
Great. Thank you, Adi, Aditya Bandi, for all the answers. It was great pleasure to learn more about Cabify, but more for me, it's like learn about great person like you are, really building sustainable world and building sustainable career, inside, in really inspiring to share this.